millions of people in the last 10 years have been thrown from their homes with evictions and what foreclosures, what they're calling unlawful detainers, which is the legal instrument they use to throw you out of your house. Millions of people nationally have been made homeless. This has contributed to this big homeless problem the cities are always talking about. It turns out that this is all based on fraud. The banking industry is in on this. The government is in on this. Counties are in on this. The court systems are in on this. We have with us Jacquie Figg, and with her partner,
Rick
Jones, has researched this deeply and come up with some amazing things. What you need when you're being evicted and you're being foreclosed is you need to show whether or not that action is legitimate and authorized. It is not. Jacquie Figg will explain. Those are my words. Let's hear her words about how you deal with this. And this not only involves foreclosures, but the entire court system and every action they take with regard to warrants,
summonses, and writs.
So the main action documents that the courts are issuing to control people's lives and to exert authority are in question. Here's why.
So the term process generally means a summons, a warrant of arrest, or a writ. And that particular product is a court product. It is solely owned by the court itself. And they are the ones that are supposed to issue those particular documents. On those documents is supposed to be what's called the requisite seal. There's a necessary seal that was designed by the legislature, and it is listed in the statutes.
That emblem, that seal.
An emblem,
Yeah.
it has been called a logo, but it's not. It's a seal. It's to actually seal the authority of the people. That's the way it is. And oddly enough, this changed in 2008. So right when everybody was losing their homes, I do remember the new name going up above the courts, and the seal was supposed to change also. And what we've discovered is that out of the 58 counties, county courts that I've contacted, I've had 32 responses back, and of those 32 responses, there's only one that has the requisite seal.
They're not really complying with the law. We're supposed to comply with the law, but they haven't been. They're lazy. They may be careless.
Yeah, we were thinking that maybe they were careless, and that's why I started to write to them. In some instances, we've actually tried to hold them accountable with a motion to quash or even a writ of mandamus. We had one court in Contra Costa, one judge pulled out his ruler, measured the seal, and said, yes, it's small, but we're going to allow it. But
even though it's not technically compliant with what the law prescribes it has to be.
The legislature.
He said, oh, that's not compliant, but I'm just going to
let that go. And the legislature says size matters. It must be 1¼ inches in diameter, and this seal fell short of that.
And it sounds like little technical things, but what it is, it's the law saying it has to be this way. And in the case of 58 counties, 57 of them pretty much going, we'll do it any way we want, kind of we don't need no stinking badges kind of thing. And it's not just the seal, but it's certain aspects of compliance with that, with their duty to, adhere to their oaths and to have their oaths in place and to have their bonding and all these things they're supposed to do. The rules say they have to do, and they go, that's so much trouble. And as long as someone walks into court and presumes them to be authorized, they get away with it anyway.
Yeah, it's about the consent of the governed.
Right.
So we're dealing with de facto courts that are not quite the statutory courts. Being creatures of statute, they are required to abide by the statute in order to have jurisdiction.
Right.
When you're talking about the seal is to be placed on a summons. There's actually a square on the seal, and it actually says seal on it for the place for the seal to be placed, and they're not doing it.
Right.
And so, technically speaking, that means that the summons or the warrant of arrest or the writ is not facially valid.
Okay.
In fact, the Supreme Court has ruled that it is then void. There's a case, it's called Aetna versus Halleck, and it was from 1868. And in that case, the Supreme Court looked at the question of the seal, and they said, if the seal is defined in the statutes and it is required on certain processes and not used, then those processes are void.
So that's actually saying that if you can find an error in the way the county is performing, then your whole action is void and you are not going to be foreclosed.
Well, I'm really looking at it from the perspective that we really want these courts to be the statutory courts. If we want them to follow the law, they need to be the creatures in the statute so we know what laws they're following. Right now, they're not following the simple compliance law, with them complying with a seal. So why would they comply with any of the other laws?
The question is this thing calling itself a court really authorized because they're not complying with what the law says they have to be complying with to be a court? So you've got a non-court entity, and it seems like if we got them into full compliance and they had the right seal and they had the right processes, that then the law says, by the way, they're accountable for their errors and their omissions and their misconduct. They're accountable. They're a public agency. We have ways to hold them accountable. So it seems like by not using the right seal, not actually being a real court, they get outside of that accountability, and everybody just gives them consent and just says, okay, you must be a court. So we're letting them act on us as a court when they're not really a court, and when they're not accountable as a court.
It does certainly feel that way. So that's really what we're worried about, is that it's not the court, and basically we're going in there and not getting substantial due process
or justice
by any means.
It is a way to instigate a massive land grab through a foreclosure quote crisis.
Yeah.
It's a way to become complicit with a bunch of crooked bankers to take people's property. So it doesn't seem like this is some kind of accident. It seems like the ways that the county has sort of accidentally not complied with the laws they must comply with give them sort of license, you might say, to become complicit with wrongdoing by the bankers.
Yeah, so the court I was discussing earlier, where the judge pulls out the ruler, it was kind of interesting because they actually went and got a new seal and actually a new stamp. So there is a difference between a seal and a stamp. Some things are required to be sealed, some things are required to be stamped. And so anyway, they went and got a new stamp. They never had a seal that we've ever seen. And that stamp, they made it bigger, but then they changed the words completely. So before they had the right words, wrong size, although the words were not structurally correct. According to the legislature, the Superior Court of California, County of, and this one was Contra Costa, is required to be in upper and lower case. Their stamp was in all uppercase. That also makes a difference.
And they know that where the law is that tells them how it has to look. This is how a seal must look. And so do you believe that was intentional?
We are beginning to believe that it is intentional from some of the changes that we're seeing, and yet they're still not complying with the black letter of the law.
So technically it's not a court. Technically it's just a place you go in and agree as a court, and therefore they're not accountable or bound by any of their performance standards, and therefore you can be completely robbed and mistreated. And this explains why so many people going into foreclosures think, how did they just rob me? How did they get away with this? This is obviously not right.
We're definitely seeing it as a place where theft occurs.
Yes, in unimaginable scale.
Yeah, probate, family law, two of the biggest theft arenas that you can imagine. Yeah. Definitely the UD court, which is the unlawful detainer court, and of course traffic court. The only reason it's there is for revenue generation.
Right. Obviously, massively off due process. If you look at how traffic courts work,
it's nothing statutory about it.
Ridiculous joke in terms of due process and protection of rights. Okay, so what do we do now? You have a website where you're going to have documents that you can serve if you're subject to a warrant, a writ, or a summons.
A summons, yeah.
Where you can serve this. And now this is important to mention, this is not something you file in your court case. You actually serve this on the thing calling itself a court, saying, no, you have to, this is an order to abate my case because you're not a court. Go over that again.
Yeah, so it's long been said that if you're coming up to a de facto officer or a de facto office, if you don't challenge that office in the right method, then basically they just roll over you and it becomes your consent. Yeah. So what we're saying is that you need to challenge the de facto court right at the beginning and ask them where is the requisite seal. Give them the opportunity to change their process and serve you with proper process, due process, legal process, and then the court case can proceed. But up until that point, it should not proceed without the requisite seal.
And it seems like you're just making picky points about little details, technical details, but these are the details that determine whether a court is legitimate or not,
Absolutely.
whether it actually is a court or not. It has to comply with the prescribed technicalities of the law. And it has to offer you those kinds of processes.
I think for those of you out there that like to buy like nice purses or handbags, you know, shoes, like there's a place called Gucci, and a lot of people know what Gucci looks like, and it's like in this case you think you're getting Gucci and actually you're getting Gucci. You know, it's a knockoff. So this is a knockoff court. It's not the real court. So
Right.
That's what we're seeing.
Right. But and so knowing that means that all of this damage that this thing calling itself a court could do to you,
It could steal everything from you. It could ruin your life.
may not be able to do that if you serve it with the right abatement, as we're talking about. Now I want to explain to people that this is not something you have to find or invent yourself. Jackie's website, internallydisplacedpeople.org, will have documents, downloadable documents. You said you're going to do a video explaining how to do the process?
Yeah, we'll have a Zoom video available so that you can help you fill out the templates, and it will be at internallydisplacedpeople.org/court seals.
Court seals / court seals.
Yes.
And that may be up, hopefully it should be up by the time we release this video. So
Yes.
hopefully go straight over to internallydisplacedpeople.org/court seals, and you will see Jacquie explaining how to do this, and you will have the free download documents that you need as templates. And we need a lot of people to do this, I think.
Yeah, we now need the numbers. So as I said earlier, we have tried to deal with this in a smaller group, and the court is very reluctant to make the correct changes. And so this just shows that they're defiant in their procedures.
In their position.
Yeah.
So is it not that if you have a court that is not using the proper seals and not complying with the technicalities they're required to, under law, to comply with, that you are sort of only there because of your consent? There's no legitimate legal action. But on the other side, if they do have the right seal and they do have everything in place and they're doing things properly and by the law as they must do, as they tell us we must do, well, then they're accountable. Then the law says they can only do this and this and this. The law says they must adhere to due process. The law says they must have these things done right. And in the case of foreclosures, usually there's many, many errors and flaws and misconduct in those processes. So in other words, whether or not the courts have the proper technical compliance in place, you have recourse on your foreclosure. On one side, you have the abatement that you serve, and
understand that a foreclosure is non-judicial as a rule. It's the unlawful detainer, which would come with both a summons and a writ at the end.
Okay.
There is another element of this, and that is a sheriff has a duty to serve a facially valid instrument. They can't just go around serving any summons, any writ, or any warrant. It needs to be what's termed facially valid.
So do we need to tell the sheriff that the document is not valid? So
there's a notice. There will be a notice on the website to tell the sheriff that the documents he is serving is not facially valid.
Right.
And he does become liable on his bonds if he has them.
Right.
You know, obviously, if they're all operating out of de facto offices, we found that they don't have the requisite oath, they don't have the requisite bonds.
Right.
So these are other elements. So this is one way where you're talking about the recognition and the authority. If we can push them back into that office, then pretty much everybody else would have to comply, because if they're a proper office, they would not be able to hire or employ officers that don't have the requisite qualifications.
Now, if I'm under an unlawful detainer and a sheriff serves papers on me that are not compliant, and the sheriff has no bond, and the sheriff has no valid oath on the record, what do I do?
We are definitely finding that. Again, it comes back to numbers. We need enough people to start making that known that they don't approve of that. I mean, that's really, really important.
But you say you're going to have a notice to serve the sheriff.
We will definitely have a notice to serve the sheriff, yes.
All right.
But we will, we don't necessarily expect that will stop the sheriff if it's just one or two people. We need people in mass to start serving notices and letting them know that, where is their court? Where is our court?
Exactly. But even one-on-one, it seems, if you can say, I was served on this by someone calling them the sheriff who had no bond and no oath, and therefore we need to fix that before we can move on.
Yes.
Okay, fix that. Okay, now some sheriff, if there is such a thing, that has the correct legally required bond and oath, serves it on me. Now we have the problem, the county's not using the proper seal or the proper process or the proper instruments or whatever. And so there are, do you not see this as a stage of multiple opportunities to challenge the system when someone's trying to steal our homes?
Yes, I see that as a way of not just challenging the system, but bringing the system back into compliance.
Right.
We were promised a Republican form of government, and one of those benefits of a Republican form of government is that the people have the power. And so this is putting the power back into the people's
Court.
Back to the people.
Forgive the pun.
Power to the people, sorry.
Right.
Yes.
So if we had compliant courts and if we had compliant sheriffs and officers and everybody doing things under the law, it would be very difficult for the bankers to be seizing homes at the rate and scale that they have since 2008.
Yes.
It's a scam, and the government is now complicit by pretending to be a legitimate government when it's acting completely outside those restraints.
Yes. So the movies that you've seen in regards to foreclosure, they may talk about, the mortgage industry itself, but they really don't address the government side of this. And definitely the courts, many of the judges have their pensions in derivatives, and so do the counties. And so this is really a heinous situation that is going on and very much causing a lot of displacement across the country.
All right, the homeless problem. It's horrible.
It's horrible.
It's
very, very sad. You see Skid Row. It's just very, very sad.
They say when a family is evicted from their home, it takes 3 generations to recover from that financially and,
I
get
spent
themselves back.
over a year in a tent. And the worst part, your children, they try to stop them from going to school, and then all you have to say is the McKinney-Vento Act for any of you out there who may be being kicked out of school. You don't even have to do anything about it. You just have to mention it, and the school has to provide you, your home school has to provide you a place there. Another thing that people don't think about. The McKinney-Vento Act.
Okay.
And another thing that people don't think about much is animals, the displacement of animals.
Right.
If you have a dog, they can live in a tent with you, but I mean, if you had rabbits, chickens, or horses, any of these other things, they're gone.
I don't think we need to make the point that
It's really
foreclosure is a very
terrifying,
horrible and disruptive thing to any family and any individual. But so what other final points do we need to make about this? Because you do have something that looks like a ray of sunshine here. You do have a way to come back on this fraud and this wrongdoing, and to possibly, now, is this a way ultimately to save a person's house?
Here's the thing. We're dealing with unknown persons, shall we say. We don't recognize them. I have never seen anything really stop them. It's kind of like standing with a piece of paper in front of a freight train. The paper's not necessarily going to save you. You must keep track of your case. Any case, you really want to make sure that it is abated.
Yeah.
So don't just serve papers and leave it at that.
Think it's done.
Think it's done. Yeah. You really must keep track of what's going on. You must be assertive in the abatement.
And it might require a follow-up, like a default service or something.
Yes.
And maybe you'll have some advice for that on your website.
Yes.
internally-displacedpeople.org//
court seals.
Seals. So you have hopefully by the time this video is up, you'll have a full kind of resource for people who may not be legally trained at all to kind of follow step by step.
Another thing that we would like is, and if you're out not in California, you're in another state, and you're prepared to do the research, if you discover any of these court seals, please send them along to us.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Other states. So
other states.
It's a different situation. Mm-hmm. And you said there was where do you look up whether they have their correct seal? That you had some advice on that.
So the rule is it comes under California rules of court. So you'd have to look under your state rules of court.
Rules of court.
Yes, in California, it's found at 10.500, and it's referred to as it's access to judicial administrative records. It is not the same place where you find out about cases that have been filed. It is totally different. You have to go to the administrative side. So
It's not in public records.
it's not in public
administrative
records. It's in the administrative records.
Okay, very good.
And you do have to ask, you will have to research, you have to read the rules as to the way that you're going to ask. So it's kind of a little bit like playing Jeopardy. So you can't just ask for an image, you have to ask for a record that contains an image.
In your request for their
Yes,
seal and their
yeah.
compliance.
In their compliance.
For how they're supposed to
Yeah.
behave as a county or as a court system.
Yes, it's a records.
Okay.
Generally, you should be able to go straight to the administrative office and ask them. That's another way that you can do
Right.
it. But generally, you would write a letter or an
Right.
email.
Right. So the important thing is that many people do this.
Yes.
Because, like you talk about that freight train, that's
Yes.
the freight train of force of the county. A few hundred of us become a freight train against
them.
And so one person, two people, it's a little more difficult. But if people get together on your website, somehow utilize your system
Mm-hmm.
and put this thing in a somewhat upscaled manner, numbers, then we have something, sort of an irresistible force that when counties, it's pointed out by many, many people that counties are sort of imposters, courts are imposters, and that they're doing serious harm to the public
Yes.
under some kind of complicity with banks or whatever, and there are large numbers doing that, we could move mountains. And that means that everyone who can go to this website and who can, obviously people who are under foreclosure have a great incentive to do this.
Yes.
This is how you save your house. Hopefully, if enough people can get behind this. Now, is it possible that one person with the right moves and using your website could make some headway into keeping their home or
Certainly in terms of unlawful detainer, because it wouldn't happen at the foreclosure stage if you're in a non-judicial state.
Okay.
A non-judicial foreclosure state. So that's a really difficult situation because it doesn't happen within the courts itself.
Whether you're in a judicial state or non-judicial state, whatever the circumstances are, is it to your benefit to bring this abatement action against the
Absolutely.
court?
Any case that's filed against you where a summons is issued, all you're going to do is look on that very first page, and if the box is blank or if the seal does not comply with the law, sometimes it just says copy. We've found all kinds of different...
You said 57 out of 58 counties that you canvassed were non-compliant.
Yeah, they're non-compliant.
So it's
all the
almost...
ones we've seen are pretty much non-compliant.
It's almost assured that you're going to have that problem. And you file the, what is it, abatement again?
You file the
or
lawful...
serve, not file.
Yeah, you serve the lawful direction for abatement at law due to facially void summons, which you can download from the website.
Internally displaced people.org/court seals.
Yes, and I just want to quickly show you a couple of examples of some of the responses that we've had.
Yeah.
So in this one right here, we have...
So responses mean you asked the county to show you their seal.
Yes.
And they said they showed
This
you.
one I got back. This one took a couple of times going back and forward, and finally I got a response from Catherine, and she's at Calaveras, and I think it's cute, so I think it's worth reading.
Okay.
This is our letterhead with the logo.
Yeah.
Our CEO has advised me to send you this.
Our CEO.
Our CEO. I'm not sure when the logo was adopted. It has been used for at least the 19 years I've been here. And as you can see on the letterhead, they have the new name of the court, which is Superior Court of California, County of Calaveras, upper and lowercase.
Right.
But when you look at the seal, it says Superior Court or Superior Court, Calaveras County, California, which is not the required seal. It's completely wrong. It's all in uppercase for one thing.
So they have it right on their letterhead.
They have it right on the letterhead
the seal,
and
they
rung
messed it
on
all
the
up.
seal. Yes.
So obviously you'll probably see this a lot.
A lot.
It's different with
It's
each
different
county.
with each
but,
one.
Yeah.
So you can see in this one, Solano, they have a copy of the stamp and the seal. Great size, great. I mean, everything's good about it except the writing is in all uppercase. So it is not the legislative typeface that was required.
Not technically compliant.
It's not technically compliant. And I don't know whether they use it correctly either. So that's another thing.
So again, these seem like minor technicalities, but they're the difference between a legitimate public agency and one who is violating the rules and not complying and not acting as a public agency.
Yeah.
They're acting as some kind of private whatever.
Exactly. This is kind of common. As you can see, they're using the same photo as or the same picture as the Great Seal of California, but they have the different wording around it. Again, the wording is not in upper and lower cases.
Hold that up a little bit. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is all upper and lower. All uppercase should be upper and lower.
It should be upper and lower.
Yeah.
And then worse still, we've had several courts that have written back and saying that they don't have a seal of their own, and so they're using the state seal. This would not be correct.
No.
So that every court is required to have its own seal. It was depicted in the statutes the way it's supposed to be written,
right.
How it's supposed to be adopted. And the Great Seal of California is only supposed to be used by the Secretary of State.
For the state, yeah.
She is the keeper of the Great Seal. So there's a bunch of seals running around that don't belong, that are in places where they don't belong. And that's a concern too.
It seems intentional. They must, if they're reading the law and how to make a seal, they would know this.
I had one court that gave me that they knew the law. They actually said to me the law, but we do this. That one was a cute one. I didn't like bring this one out. And then here we have one. This one here says Superior Court, Ventura County, California. This one's completely wrong. Wrong size, wrong writing around it, and the wrong it's in uppercase.
Okay.
And then this is the only county that was correct. This is Superior Court of California, County of San Diego.
Yeah.
However, we have various samples of summonses issued by San Diego, which shows although the clerk has the requisite seal, they even know when it was adopted. Actually, this San Diego and Calaveras kind of, gave me the most amount of information, and Napa. Napa actually was wonderful with giving me information. But they don't seem to know how to use the seal. They don't realize that it's supposed to be used on a summons or a writ.
You look at your summons, your writ, or your warrant, and you look for that. You look for that.
Exactly.
At your website,
Absolutely.
It says how it exactly has to be.
Yes.
It has to go. I mean, this is not something you're making up. It's
I'm not making
quoted
it up,
from the law. This has to be this, has to be this, has to be this.
Yes.
If you look at what it has to be, and then you look at the stamp or the imprint or whatever on your writ, summons, or warrant, and it's not matching or not compliant, you do the abatement of whatever you. Say that again, Dia.
The lawful direction for abatement. Let me grab that again.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, and it was specifically designed for a reason, but lawful direction for abatement at law due to facially void summons.
Right.
So, it is a common law action, and so it was very specific in its wording.
Right, so if they're a legitimate court, if they were real, they'd have to abate with that. If they're not real, they might ignore.
If they were real, they would have the right seal.
Right.
And what I hope to get from this video, Jerry, is enough people to see, and especially the rule followers out there. We want the rule followers to see, look, here's the rules, and these people who you think are enforcing the rules, they're not following their own rules. And that's really the main issue that we want to get across here.
If they expect you to follow the rules, would you not expect them to follow their own rules as well?
And we would be happy to follow the rules. If I was walking into what I would call a legislative court, then I would feel like I would be getting substantial due process and some justice.
And you would have accountability.
I would have accountability
for their conduct.
Yes, right now we're seeing no accountability.
They're not acting properly. When you call them on it, they say, I don't have to act properly.
Or like the judge with the ruler.
Right. They say, well, that doesn't apply, but today I'm just going to call it okay. We see this all the time.
Of course,
traffic court everywhere.
It's the court with no seal telling us that the small seal is okay.
Right. So it's a difficult problem.
It's a difficult problem.
Because they're not really a legitimate court. They're not the court telling you anything.
Yeah.
So part of it is there a way for me to go in or deal with this court where I don't grant consent to them as a court?
That's why we chose the abatement as opposed to a motion. Because a motion, you're pretty much saying, hey, I recognize you and I'm asking you to do something for me.
So if you send in the abatement and they're supposed to dismiss or abate on that,
yes.
and they call you back,
yes.
you just send in a copy of that abatement. So I'm sorry, you were abated. It's done.
Yeah, I think you know, I'm not sure where we go with our next step, except maybe the legislature.
Right.
I have been to the legislature previously on this subject and tried to ask them questions. They do tend to clam up. I also have spoken to the Judicial Council over the last 2 years. I brought them this problem and they kind of said to me, so are you saying that all of our processes are void? And I'm like, well, I'm not saying that. The Supreme Court says that.
Thank you.
I'm not dictating how this is supposed to be. I'm just looking for the legislative court.
Exactly. And if you go to the legislature, you need to present numbers. In other words, the legislature doesn't notice anything unless there's a good movement on it. So is there a way, or will there be a way, when this video is out, you'll have your website up, you'll have your abatement forms that people can download, you'll have your video on how to do it. Will you also have on that website a way for people to register with you so that you can walk into the legislature and say, I've got 2,000 people who have done this, what about them? As opposed to, I did it myself.
That would be great. Another option that we could do is maybe put a link so that people can actually send a copy to the legislature.
Right.
Because maybe if the representatives in the legislature start seeing that, hey, people are waking up, we're seeing that this is not the way that you've said it.
Right. That's even better because they go direct.
They can go direct.
But they can ignore things. And I've done petitions where I collected petitions and the government immediately undercounted my petitions by 50%, shamelessly looking me right in the eye. And I said, where did you get that number? They said, that's what we counted. What are you going to do about it? So
that would definitely be possible. We could put up a petition, a link to a petition so that people could actually sign the petition. That would be great.
If you'd like to be heard and like to be represented in the action of correcting corrupt banks, unauthorized courts, people who are unlawfully seizing people's homes and throwing them out on the street homeless, if you'd like to be part of that, there's a little step you can take, which is to add your name to some kind of list, and there's the phone. I think we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.